Welcome to this session on European partnerships, which is held for the second time during the R&I Days. Last year, we discussed the characteristics of the new European partnerships and their potential. This year, we'll come closer to their implementation and impact. Our topic for this session is European partnerships stepping up the game. My name is Darja Isaksson. I'm the Director General of Vinnova, Sweden's innovation agency, and I'll be your moderator for this session. Now, it's clear to us all that we are the last generation with a window of opportunity to transform every value chain, every city, every consumption pattern into something sustainable. If we succeed, our children will prosper in a society that's better than ours. The alternative is abysmal. We know research and innovation is key to achieving our goals. We also know we can only succeed if we work together. Now, different forms of European partnerships have been around for almost 20 years, with the overall aim to overcome fragmentation of research efforts and to facilitate better collaboration between the Commission, member states, associated countries, and industry. Today, partnerships are in a unique position to address the complex challenges of today's societies as they build on long-term strategic research and innovation agendas that are shared and committed by all partners. By pooling and mobilizing resources towards common objectives, the partnerships are potentially at the heart of achieving the SDGs, as well as reaching Europe's goal of being the first climate-neutral continent, achieving a circular economy, and pushing the digital transformation. Horizon Europe, therefore, introduces a more strategic and impact-driven policy to European partnerships. Partnerships must demonstrate clear strategic vision, including clear targets for 2030, and are expected to develop a systemic approach with integrated sets of activities, not only to research and innovation, but activities also related to social, market, and regulatory uptake. The aim of this session is to discuss whether the ambitions of the candidate partnerships are meeting the urgency of our challenges, and how to ensure that partnerships more forcefully can contribute to accelerate transitions and systemic change. With us today, we have a distinguished panel that will contribute to the discussion from their respective background and competence. You in the audience will also have the opportunity to ask your questions to these panelists after their initial remarks. I hope to have a really interactive session. But before we get to listen to them, we have the honor of welcoming Director General Jean-Éric Paquet to set the scene for our dialogue. Please welcome.
I'm delighted to welcome you in this workshop on partnership, stepping up the game. You have really done that already as we were preparing Horizon Europe over the last 18 months, be it member states, industrial partners, research organizations, universities, you all accepted that we now move forward with partnerships. Firstly, try to maybe focus the areas. So we are moving from about 120 partnerships now to a bit less than 50. I think that's an important concentration, which will allow more impact. You also, in all cases, have accepted that we work on partnerships, not just to come together to do research, but with a very clear purpose. This is the impact-driven nature of Horizon Europe. I think it's particularly visible in partnerships, and here also everybody is upping its game. And I think what we now need to do is to ensure that all actors are effectively mobilizing resources. This cannot just be about Horizon Europe putting funding. Of course, there will be substantial funding under Horizon Europe. But if we want to make a difference for Europe with these partnerships, for the green transition, for the digital transition, for the many other challenges which we are facing, we need not just the frameworks, we also need effectively to put our resources together. So I very much hope that during this panel, we will have confirmation from member states, industry, research organizations, that they are ready to do that. The final decision on the partnerships is really now imminent. We are in the last mile of the preparation. There will be the proposal on institutional partnership shortly. And in the strategic plan, we will have, of course, then the longer list of partnerships on which more work will take place to make them come to life and achieve that impact. So this is one of the components of Horizon Europe, which is going to define our success, define our impact. So I really call on all of you to keep up and continue stepping up your game. I hope you will have a productive session. I'm very much looking forward to the results. Thanks a lot.
Quite inspirational and clear expectations from the Commission. So I'll first turn to you, Dr. Hilde Eggermann. You're the coordinator of the Belgian Biodiversity Platform, you're vice chair of the current partnership Biodiversa, as well as a representative of the candidate European Partnership Biodiversity. So if I ask you, what's the vision of the Biodiversity Partnership? What makes your proposal transformative? And what do you see as the main challenges to your vision?
Thank you. Well, when it comes to biodiversity, I think it's important to understand that and also to recognize that nature is our ally. It's underpinning our health, it's underpinning our livelihoods, it's underpinning our life quality, food security and economies. But we also see from recent reports that biodiversity is declining at unprecedented rates. We see that we are missing out on the targets. And that's mainly because biodiversity has not been sufficiently mainstreamed in different sectors and different policies. Implementation of existing policies has been quite weak, and it has not been tackling the root causes of biodiversity loss. Now, 2020, it should have been actually the pivotal year for biodiversity, with the renewal of the strategic plan under the Convention of Biodiversity. But of course, it has been postponed due to COVID. It will be dealt with next year. Meanwhile, we do have the European Biodiversity Strategy 2030. We have the European Farm to Fork strategy that was launched, also recognizing the importance of biodiversity for sustainable food production. So all of this is setting the scene and creating also huge opportunities for the partnership on biodiversity to help bending the curve. Now, when it comes to the Biodiversity Partnership, our vision is basically closely aligned to the one of the EU Biodiversity Strategy, and that is to put nature back on a path of recovery by 2030. And of course, it's a big thing to achieve, and very concretely, the Biodiversity Partnership will provide an overarching platform to connect both the ministries in charge of research and innovation policies, funding agencies, and also foundations with ministries in charge of environmental policies and environmental protection agencies to together support the implementation of the EU Biodiversity Strategy. And thus bringing together actors that have previously, I could say, maybe have been working in silos. And so we will need to create added value for both from the start, and creating and looking for objectives that can build bridges between both types of ministries. Now, we strongly believe that the Biodiversity Partnership can indeed support transformative change, supporting the transition at the different levels by, for example, reinforcing the knowledge base, producing policy-relevant research, solution-oriented research, for example, research that will help us to develop and deploy nature-based solutions, research that will guide policy development, that will also assess efficiency of policies. We also hope that with the partnership we can actually promote new approaches and new tools that will supplement traditional approaches to biodiversity conservation. For example, looking at artificial intelligence, looking at the possibilities, for example, of synthetic biology, looking at nature-based solutions. Important, of course, is also the mainstreaming part of the Biodiversity Partnership by bringing together these different types of ministries, but also by engaging closely with stakeholders, including the business sector, making the business case for biodiversity, and also by internationalization of the partnership, because we do hope that it's not only connecting it to the Convention of Biodiversity, connecting it to the IPBES, but also to focus on the external dimension of Europe and our impact on biodiversity beyond borders. I think the challenge will mainly be to manage expectations, to recognize what the partnership can do and maybe what it cannot do. For example, some activities may go beyond the mandate of the partnership. For example, they would fall under the mandate of, for example, the LIFE program, but then it will be important that we articulate with these initiatives and that we just look for synergies and that we're not duplicating efforts. And I think also some activities could be taken up in collaboration with other partnerships. So yeah, we look really very much forward to work together with other types of partnerships to see and to tackle common challenges. Thank you.
Thank you. To create really important opportunities for many stakeholders, ourselves included. Let me turn to you, Mrs. Angel Sorduña. You're the Executive Director of Aspire that runs the current public-private partnership Spire, and you're also representing the candidate European Partnership Process for Planet, which I'm really eager to hear more about. What's the vision of Process for Europe? What makes your proposal transformative, and what do you see as your main challenges to achieve your vision? I hope we can. Hang on, we didn't hear you, so try again.
Yeah, can you hear me now?
Absolutely, welcome.
Perfect, thank you. Sorry about that. So the truth is that we are facing major challenges at a level of demand that has grown exponentially, and this requires great actions from the industry also. So we need solutions to reach the climate neutrality goals and to reach a truly circular society and economy. We need solutions that ensure that we, your children, your grandchildren will have a planet to live in and jobs to live with dignity and health. But also then business as usual is not an option. It's not an option for the industry. It's not an option for the public sector, and it's not an option for citizens. We need really a systemic change. And this is something that I think has become very evident for most of us after the global outbreak of COVID-19, but it was true before. And to reach this sustainable society, we need a sustainable economy. So we need competitiveness. This is what has driven the Processes for Planet 2050 roadmap. Processes for Planet is one of the candidates for Horizon Europe partnerships, and it has a unique characteristic, which is its cross-sectorial approach. So we gather now 10 process industry sectors which are committed to join their best efforts to achieve three ambitions. The first one is to bridge the climate technology gap towards the net zero emissions. The second one is to deliver solutions to do a change of paradigm that brings industry and society from waste concept to resources paradigm, meaning that our work focuses on delivering solutions to move towards near zero landfilling and towards zero waters discharge. The third one is to keep and enlarge the global competitiveness of the process industry that will ensure jobs and will track the growth of SMEs. So this is very important. All ASPA sectors are committed to make this happen through cooperation and synergies at local, at regional, at national, and ultimately at European level. So we need to join forces with the Commission, with the regions, with the member states, with other partnerships, and even with other sectors which are not within Aspire. The technologies needed to provide these solutions to climate neutrality are not even there, or their economic and technical feasibility needs to be proven. So we need to bridge the gap, and the gap is really very big. In the case of the process industry, long investment cycles are required from 10 to 20 years, so we have only 2 rounds of investments ahead before 2050. And the investments needed to deliver impact are very high. Our roadmap estimates more than 10 billion euros are needed to develop the innovations, but then to deploy the solutions at scale across Europe, billions or even trillions investments will be needed. So the reality check is that a lot of support is needed with urgency to de-risk the investments. If we do manage to de-risk them if we do not manage in Europe to de-risk these innovations by 2030, 40, 50, we will have a big problem. So we need to really fill the gap. Horizon Europe supports innovation to TRL 7 or 8 in some cases, but impact comes when when TRL 9 is reached. So it's only at this moment that we can really deploy the solutions to benefit society. And a blended approach beyond Horizon Europe is needed. We have several proposals there. We have the first of a kind plans, which is very innovative and which is going to be really a solution to deliver into society. We have the Hubs for Circularity proposal. We have many proposals on competitiveness to reach market uptake. So I will probably, I'm running out of time, I guess, so I will talk more about this afterwards. But I think as an introduction to what we need and what we offer, it's already a good point.
Thank you for a very strong message, both on the importance of bridging the technology gap and also the urgency of the investments needed. Now, let me turn to you, Dr. Janusz Podocznik. You were a commissioner for science and research in 2004 to 2010 when ERA and the first partnerships with member states were created. Many next-generation European partnerships now aim to accelerate transitions in areas that the UN International Resource Panel has been focusing on, such as sustainable resource management, climate change, and resource efficiency, as we heard before. Now, does the ambition of the partnerships correspond to the challenges that we're currently facing, to your mind? And how do we ensure that these next generation partnerships deliver on the goals? And what will it really take for them to initiate real political and institutional changes across Europe?
Yeah. It's a great pleasure to be with you and also to address you today. Let me start with strange times we are facing and put them in the context of today's session, what we can learn from them. There are actually three crises the world and the European Union are currently facing: the acute health and socioeconomic crisis, as economies have shut down, and also a crisis with deeper roots, a chronic crisis of globalization and economic transformation. The latter has been feeding climate change and income inequality and many other challenges which we are facing. Many are saying that the world after the COVID-19 will not be the same again, but it will be the same. We will just hopefully understand it better. Very likely the frequency and severity of health-related outbreaks, climate-related extreme weather events will in the future increase. And we need to rethink the way we are managing the risks as individuals and collectively, as private companies and public policymakers, locally and globally. We need to build more resilient societies and be better prepared. What can we learn from both the health and climate environment crisis is that the role of science-informed policymaking should be strengthened in the future. Developing a critical mass of peer-reviewed science supporting policy decisions is critical if we want to manage challenges we face. Both health and climate environment crises are thus demanding more cooperation and also stronger partnerships on all the levels, including European and including when it comes also to research and innovation. We have a European Green Deal, the new growth strategy that aims to transform EU into a fair and prosperous society. For the first time in the European Commission's history has been really clearly stated that economic development in the future is not in contradiction with environmental interests, and that protecting environment and health is actually a precondition for future economic development and well-being. I will be always the first to defend the great vision introduced by the European Green Deal, but while the targets are clear, the implementation is quite uncertain. The reason is the fact that the European Green Deal communication and its implementing documents are to an important extent lacking the focus on the reasons, drivers and pressures, and the needed system changes which would help us address the challenges we face. European partnerships are an ideal opportunity to fix some of those gaps. Collaboration was always an important ingredient of European research and innovation programs. And European partnerships are expected to leave this collaboration, let's call it collaboration with a purpose, to another level and connect it directly to the European Green Deal vision, to introduce a more strategic, coherent and impact-driven approach. A very promising instrument in a unique position to address complex challenges as it is based on a long-term strategic research and innovation agenda, shared and committed by all partners. This allows, of course, pooling and mobilizing additional resources towards common objectives. Many of the proposed 49 partnerships are doing exactly that. But I was not asked to tell you what you already know, but to rather mention an area or two where I see that more attention would be probably still needed. In the report Systemic, where I'm a partner, is preparing with the Club of Rome. It is titled A System Change Compass, Implementing a European Green Deal in Time of Recovery. By the way, it will be published till the end of the month. We have identified 8 economic ecosystems important from natural resource management lenses. They are either designed to deliver specific resource-intensive societal needs, 4 of them, healthy food, built environment, intermodal mobility, and other consumer goods, or to support these ecosystems in their delivery of societal needs. These are nature-based solutions, energy, materials following, of course, circular logic, and information and processing. One of the major problems we have identified is that many of the analyses and approaches are predominantly based on supply side, and to a lesser extent, they are addressing the demand side of the economy. When it comes to the use of natural resources, the major problem and the biggest potential for improvement connected to that lies in addressing a massive underutilization of various resources when it comes to meeting human needs. We can see that in mobility. Typical privately owned European car is effectively utilized 2%. In housing, in textile, and I could continue. So dematerialization, introduction of service-based models, addressing the ownership problem in production and consumption, shifting from resource efficiency to resource sufficiency are those important questions which could probably be better addressed also in proposed partnerships. As mentioned by Hilde, we have to go to the root causes for biodiversity loss, climate change, and these are the root causes. I'm also missing a partnership which would address the future of the forest management. Forests are the lungs of the planet. Forests are an indispensable treasure of the European continent, an ecosystem we should nurture, protect, and explore. We need more strategic approach to forests, forestry, and forest-based solutions. It is an incredible socio-ecological infrastructure for the Green Deal implementation. Saying that, the proposed partnerships with purpose could be an excellent and important contribution to future European Green Deal delivery, and I'm glad I can participate in the debate, which should, as you are rightly saying in the title, step up the game. So let's join the forces on EU and global level, and let's step up the game.
Thank you so much. You remind us that science clearly shows that no long-term economy will function outside the planetary boundaries, and I'm happy that you so clearly see partnerships as key, and also that you stress the urgency to address demand-side issues for transformation. Now, let me turn to you, Professor Henrik Johnson. You have experience with long-term strategic partnerships with the industry, and since I'm also a Swede, I'm extra excited about your current work in the US on an agreement between the White House Office of Science and Technology Policy and the Swedish government in areas such as artificial intelligence, 5G, and quantum technology, areas where the US are quite a driving force today. Now, what opportunities do you see for future European partnerships, considering the current political and geopolitical context? And how do you see that partnerships can step up their game to benefit the whole of Europe and increase our global importance in relationship to digital and green technologies, technological autonomy, and other important areas that we've briefly touched upon so far?
Yeah, good morning, Europe, from House of Sweden in Washington, D.C. It's morning here. And thanks, Daria, for the introduction, and to the European Commission for inviting me to this session. So my key message today is it makes sense for Europe partnership to team up with international partners. It's good for Europe. It's necessary for solving the global challenges. In fact, European partnerships are a very attractive entry point for international partners, as in them you have the major players under one roof. So what can Europe do to step up the game, as called for by the Commission? How can we create a European innovation ecosystem that is more disruptive and manage to scale up European success stories? And what can we learn from others? I'm Sweden's Science and Innovation Counselor in the United States, and based on my first-hand experience here, there are 4 key elements for success. Strategic focus. To be innovative, you need to be strategic. And this is the whole idea of the new approach for the European Partnership under Horizon Europe. Commitment for long-term and sufficient public and private funding. Able to attract talents. This should follow if we are bold enough with our ambitions. Strong university industry cooperation. We have great examples of innovative regional hubs with a global outreach on both sides of the Atlantic. Just quickly look at the importance of large-scale federal funding in the US after World War II. It has historically created disruptive technologies like the internet and GPS technology, etc. In addition, federal funding is the foundation and the reason why we today have so many successful and innovative US companies. 13 out of the 16 largest tech companies in the world are Americans: Apple, Google, Amazon, etc. The US also managed to create success stories with dual use, which means the military research became a tool also for civil applications. Look, for instance, how DARPA innovates with their project models and how it's accepted to fail. They have further created 17 national labs with the surrounding ecosystem connected to industry and universities. In Sweden, we are, for instance, proud of the European Spallation Sword, ESS, and Max IV facilities with the surrounding science village. In addition, the White House recently announced a $1 billion investment on quantum and AI. They're building up 12 research institutes. So now is a perfect opportunity for relevant European partnership to connect with them. Look at EuroHPC, the High Performance Computing Partnership, for instance. Second is the talent attraction. With the pandemic and a more restrictive migration policy, the flow of competence could and will change. So where will they go? Europe, Asia? Therefore, increased mobility is a key feature for Europe to succeed with its missions and partnerships. Look at the Nobel laureates America managed to attract and support. 40% of the laureates since 1901 are Americans or have a connection to an American institute. Finally, it's hard to have excellent research and innovation without excellent education. Silicon Valley is a beautiful example of this in the United States. And if you're interested, I will be happy to elaborate and describe the reason why I think Silicon Valley succeeded and how countries and organizations should have a strategic connection to the Valley. Other trends that I see as valuable ingredients for stepping up the game are investing in social good, which is finally becoming profitable. We need to innovate with equity in mind. I also see that several of the European partnerships have the possibility to work on the digital divide, meaning that a large number of the population don't even have access to the internet. In the US, about 30 million people is in that situation. This, in combination with the Black Lives Matter movements, will probably have a large impact on future policies. As a conclusion, I strongly suggest we need to make international R&I cooperation a trademark of EU research and innovation actions, including European partnership. Europe has all the necessary ingredients to succeed. Thank you.
Thank you so much, all of you, for your inspirational and quite demanding remarks. Now, dear audience, it's your opportunity to ask your question to our panelists. We're following the chat and we'll pick up your questions from there. Here is one. Most partnerships are industry-led. Why should biodiversity research use partnerships rather than using more usual research instrument? Perhaps a question directed to you, Dr. Egerman.
I think from previous experiences, we have seen that if we only stick to research and innovation actors, it will be difficult to actually make the change and to connect to policies. So what the added value of this type of partnership will be is that it will allow us to bring in different types of actors, different types of ministries. It will also allow us to bring in both the policy side, managers and scientists, bring all of these actors together, even connected also with the citizens by including components of citizen science, which will also be very important if we want to change behavior, if we want to move social norms. So actually this new tool will create opportunities that were not there in the past by, I think, not only scaling up the ambition, but also using new types of approaches to connect the different actors to mainstream biodiversity across sectors, across policies, and actually allowing us to tackle the root causes of biodiversity loss, because that is linked to our production and consumption pattern. It's linked to changes of subsidies. It's linked to also the rule of law. So there are a lot of things that we need to change, and it's not possible to just do it within your own silo. We will have to collaborate across different bodies and partners.
Thank you so much. Here's another question. How can these proposed short-term partnerships have true long-term impact? And I would encourage any of our panelists to dive in and share your perspective on that.
I can start if you want. I think we can deliver impact by really delivering the right solutions that society needs. For example, in the case of Processes for Planet, it's clear for us that our industry will go through a series of innovative projects, bringing them to zero emissions and zero waste. So this will improve integration of renewable electricity, for example, electrification of the process, integration of renewable hydrogen, CO2 capture and use, heat reuse, but also the upcycling of the waste into resources that are reintroduced in the industrial system in bulk quantities, and then also the delivery of eco-design solutions. But then we have two, as I mentioned before, two tools which are very important. One is the first-of-a-kind plans. So once Horizon Europe has supported us, our projects to deliver the innovations up to TRL 7 or 8 within the program, then we will still need to reach the TRL 9 so that this goes into the society. This means that all the solutions developed on their own, they cannot deliver the transition. It's the integration of the solutions into new units within a plant or into new and innovative plans that is going to deliver the transformation and the transition. The hubs for circularity are a tool to collaborate from a systemic perspective with the territories, with the regions, with the industrial sites, with neighboring regions. So it's a tool to collaborate with the civil society, with industry, with policymakers, with financiers, so that we can all deliver these solutions and deliver them until the moment they are ready to be deployed. Otherwise, there is no impact.
Thank you. And while we wait for another question, I would love to hear then from you, Dr. Podolchnik, because this has a lot to do with things you mentioned earlier. So let me ask you, could you reflect a bit on the complementarity also between EU and national efforts, considering that countries are now planning large investments and developing ambitious R&I programs in many priority areas? We heard of a few here. What are your reflections on the opportunities for complementarity, which also has to do with the timescale we're talking about?
Yeah, I will touch also on that issue, but just a short comment on the question which was actually answered before. I agree that short-termism is one of the major problems which we are facing today, because short-termism it's inbuilt in our political decision-making process. It's inbuilt in businesses, because you know how the rewards are basically based on yearly results. It's built in financial systems and so on. So, but I also at the same time believe that 7 years, which is devoted to this program, it's not a so short period of time. And if the program will truly focus on long-term decisions, then we can get the proper answers. So it could actually be part of the approach that this short-termism is also addressed through the research which is done. But going, Daria, to your second question, I think it's really important to understand that we have a unique opportunity. Basically, it's now or never, because we have a lot of goals which are linked to 2030, and the funding mechanism which we have on the European Union level, it's 21-27. So the MFF, the budgetary structure, which is, we could discuss how much it's actually capable to address all those issues, but it's a unique opportunity. But on the other hand, we have also the recovery fund, now 750 additional billions, and these are more in the hands of the member states. And I think it would be really, really essential that we do understand that basically the post-COVID recovery and implementing the crisis which is linked with the problems with European Green Deal is addressing are in a way two sides of the same coin. And those things needs to be aligned. If we miss this opportunity, then the only thing which we will do, we will, in the first place, terribly in-depth future generations through depleting of natural capital, which we are currently doing, and in-depth them additionally through financial engagements, which we are doing with these enormous efforts which the governments are doing to financially support the post-COVID recovery. So we have the Green Deal, we have a kind of North Star, and I think that the partnership, if they will be working in that context, could contribute also to alignment of those financial plans.
Thank you so much. So just, yes, please go ahead, Professor Johnson.
Yeah, so
You want
a quick response to that excellent question. I think in the Horizon Europe structure, you have created a great possibility with the Pillar 1 and Pillar 3, where you have excellent research and excellent innovation. The key part here is, of course, the universities, and how do you create a long-term and put the research into the education. I mentioned that in my intro. And that's, I think, is the key to success, to create the impact that research and education are connected. And I think the question is, how do we transfer and perform then workforce development? And there are initiatives that we can inspire globally how to work with that with partnership. It could be complex, but the common denominator here is that the university is involved in both the research and then the education. I stop there.
Thank you. And let's just see if we have more questions from the audience. Here is one. What incentives do public and private actors have to join and finance research and innovation partnerships? Any data, good practices, or lesson learned from the existing ones? And in our panel, we have loads of experience from partnerships. So raise your hand. Who wants to go first? Reflections on incentives. Yes, please. Go ahead, Dr. Egermont.
Thank you. Well, I think, but now I'm looking indeed at the challenge of biodiversity and biodiversity loss. I think it's clear that not a single state, nor the EU on its own, has the capacity to address all the challenges of biodiversity loss. So it means that we will have to look for efficient cooperation between both member states and the EU. And I think that will create leverage for the actions. And so it will be possible to actually scale up our actions if we do it through the partnership. So that could be an added value. Of course, in the case of co-funded partnerships, there's also an element of co-funding of the European Commission that will create additional capacity for partners to act. I think partnerships will also create capacity in terms of exchange of best practices between member states because they are connected through that network. And so that is also an important element to be part of the partnerships. And I think on a general note, it will just reduce fragmentation of resources, fragmentation of efforts that are currently ongoing. So I think it's just a way to be more efficient and to have more leverage and to make the change.
Thank you. And our other panelists, would you like to add to the matter of why should you be in a partnership? What are the incentives? Yes, go ahead.
Yeah. Thank you very much. I think it's a wonderful question and very important. So, for example, in our case, what our sectors tell is that from the moment they joined together, they started to have this continuous dialogue on research and innovation, they have learned so much about each other, and this has allowed them to build joint and common solutions to common problems. And this is very important. For SMEs, for example, they always tell us the fact that we have a roadmap that describes all the research and innovation strategy of the process industry, that describes what are the needs, what are the key points to focus, has allowed them to identify which are their market opportunities. That is a great pitch for the industry, for the SMEs. It's also very important that we all have access to a common pool of knowledge, of talent, of solutions that can be transferred across sectors, so that we have a common voice. So that's a stronger voice to raise. And then if we join now these under Horizon Europe with a stronger alignment of the industry with the policymakers, both in the member states and in Europe, that can make us very, very powerful all together as partnerships.
Thank you so much. I'm afraid that our time is running out, so I have one last thing now that we've had a chance to listen for your insights. If you would like to summarize your message to the audience now in one sentence, what would that be? And I'll first give the word to you, Dr. Eggerman.
It's maybe two sentences. The Biodiversity Partnership is committed to help putting Europe back on a path of ecological recovery by 2030. But this will require relevant actors to break down silos, to align their priorities, and also to place research and innovation at the heart of the implementation of the EU Biodiversity Strategy for 2030.
Thank you. And over to you, Ms. Orduña.
So I would say partnerships will be fundamental to transform challenges into opportunities. And then processes for planet sectors are committed to reach the transformation and the transition, and we need to do it together. It's a systemic change.
Dr. Podajic.
Yeah, a bit complicated, sorry. Sharing sovereignty and sharing knowledge is making us stronger, and together we can manage the challenges we face. For a real partnership, we need a partner, European Union, and a ship for joint journey, European partnership.
Thank you. And Professor Johnson, what would you like to say?
I think we take international collaboration for granted, like it happens anyway. But we really need to stimulate and continue to support the mobility and international collaboration. So the last sentence is, the beauty with science is that it's borderless, and that success comes through collaboration.
Strong words. I would like to summarize by saying a big thank you. We've now been reminded of how essential it is to use partnerships in research and innovation as drivers for transition and systemic change. We've heard quite a bit about how to go about it in practice, but also a bit about the challenges for moving further, and even a bit of a call out for some partnerships that may be missing. I would like to finish up by thank you all for participating in this open session covering ground on the matter of how can we step up efforts to achieve the transformations we need. So let me finish off by thanking all of you panelists for your insights and engagement, your audience for your participation. The session has been educational, inspirational, and motivational. So outside of this session, we have a lot of work to do. So yes, let's get to it. And thank you so much.